So if you have ideas, don't hesitate reaching out to myself, Reverend Brown, to give us ideas on how to bring back awareness of what we have to fight for, and also to know that it won't happen overnight. Talking to those 18 to 22, 23-year-olds the other day, I realized they want microwave. They want it immediately. And I talked about the bus boycott being 381 days. And this is 50 to 60 kids. And I asked, what you know.
I first came to New Orleans back in 2019. Like most people who visit New Orleans, I came for touristy reasons: food, music, history, Bourbon Street. However, during my first visit over 4 years ago, I noticed something I wasn't expecting. There is a huge Honduran population in New Orleans. This came as a surprise to me because New Orleans is known for jazz, po' boys, swamp tours, and Café du Monde, but not for having the biggest Honduran population in the United States. In fact, during this trip to understand the Honduran diaspora in New Orleans, one of the Hondurans I interviewed joked that New Orleans is considered the unofficial 19th department of Honduras since the actual country has 18 departments, which are similar to US states. How did that happen? Unless you specifically Google why there are so many Hondurans in New Orleans, this is a community that is often overlooked when tourists come to visit. You don't really hear people visiting New Orleans because they want to try the best Honduran food outside of Honduras, which is a shame because the history of Honduras and New Orleans goes back well over 100 years. I've been sitting on this question for 4 years. I haven't been able to find any YouTube videos speaking about the rich and varied history that Hondurans have in New Orleans. So eventually, I said to myself, what the hell? Armed with my curiosity, a few books, and 5 days in New Orleans, I set out to explore the Big Easy to find out exactly why there is such a big Honduran population in this city. But first, a little history of the relationship between Honduras and New Orleans can help us understand why so many Hondurans have made New Orleans their home. And for that, we have to go back all the way to 1910. In his book, From the Banana Zones to the Big Easy, Dr. Glenn Chambers explains how between the 1910s and 1940s, the United Fruit Company and Standard Fruit Company held a monopoly on the fruit trade in Central America. Both fruit companies were extremely shady to say the least. Anyone who knows just a little bit about the history of these companies knows they have been responsible for destabilizing Central American governments by bribing politicians, taking away land from local farmers, and violently putting down any ideas of unionization or strikes to keep control of the Central American fruit trade. To go over the many crimes the United Fruit Company and Standard Fruit Company have committed in Central America would take hours, but for the purposes of this video, both companies had huge involvement in Honduras due to the banana enclaves. New Orleans was a port city back then, so merchant ships from Honduras to New Orleans offered countless Hondurans the opportunity to work as seamen and sailors and freely travel between the two destinations. Inevitably, many Hondurans would decide to settle in New Orleans for a variety of reasons, whether it was for better job opportunities, family, or just a chance for adventure. From this early wave of Honduran immigrants, a sort of base was created that allowed this community to flourish in New Orleans for generations to come. Granted, people from other Central American countries such as Guatemala, El Salvador, Nicaragua, and Costa Rica would also find their way to New Orleans. But unlike other migrant groups who use New Orleans as a springboard to arrive at other American cities, Hondurans stayed in New Orleans by forming small pocket communities during these early days. These first Honduran immigrants would be the permanent connection for future Hondurans to arrive in New Orleans. During the Cold War, many Hondurans fled the US due to the proxy war fought in their country, and many ended up in New Orleans thanks to the family connections made in the early and mid 20th century. In 1998, Hurricane Mitch hit Honduras with such a destructive force that once again many Hondurans migrated to the US and headed to New Orleans. Hondurans would later assist greatly in rebuilding the city of New Orleans after the destruction of Hurricane Katrina. Another recent major event that led to Honduran immigration to New Orleans, which I completely forgot about but is no less important, was the Honduran coup of 2009. During my visit to the main library of New Orleans, I came across this significant event in Honduran history by searching its archives. Truth be told, I felt ashamed how completely I erased this coup from my memory. I do remember it happening, even though I'm not Honduran, my ethnic roots do come from two Central American countries, so there is a sense of camaraderie from one Central American country to another. Still, that made the guilt of me forgetting about the 2009 Honduran coup even bigger, and to make up for this lack of knowledge, I am currently reading the book The Long Honduran Night by Dana Frank. Nothing more perfect than a library to fill you with knowledge about events you didn't realize are very relevant to the topic you are studying. Switching gears to Hurricane Katrina for a bit, it's easy to forget now, but Katrina was such a destructive event in New Orleans history that it has been embedded into the history of the city. I wanted to know how Hondurans were involved in rebuilding the city, so I went to the Katrina National Memorial Foundation to learn about how Hondurans were affected both before, during, and after Katrina hit the city. Camera recording is not allowed inside, but the founder and CEO of the Katrina National Memorial Foundation, Omar Casimir, was kind enough to let me take photographs and provided valuable information about how New Orleans as a whole has been struggling to recover from Katrina even almost 20 years later. Thousands lost their lives, and even more lost their homes. The official death toll due to Katrina stands at around 10,000, though many locals are adamant that the amount is at least twice as much. Those who were lucky enough to survive found their homes destroyed and forced to start their lives over with what they had left. Unfortunately for Hondurans living in the city, this experience would be all too similar as in 1998, 7 years before Katrina, Hurricane Mitch caused an equal amount of destruction in Central America, with Honduras being hit especially hard. Like Katrina, Mitch would cause catastrophic flooding in Honduras, with the death toll rising to 7,000 just in Honduras alone. Katrina made many of the Hondurans that fled because of Hurricane Mitch go through the trauma of losing their homes and sometimes even loved ones all over again. Katrina might seem like it happened a long time ago, but many who survived it and lost so much to it are still alive, and their stories of loss and recovery should not be forgotten. Omar Casimir himself is just one of thousands alive today who lost not just his home, but also beloved family members. The Katrina National Memorial Foundation serves as a reminder that, while much of the city has physically recovered since Katrina, there is still a lot of healing that needs to be done. Switching gears again, like the late great Anthony Bourdain once said, the history of a culture is in your plate. Finding Honduran restaurants in New Orleans is easy. Just type in Honduran restaurants in Google and you'll have plenty to choose from. I made sure to have at least one Honduran breakfast, lunch, and dinner while in the city. The perfect place to start was breakfast at Alma Cafe. The owner of the restaurant is Melissa Araujo, an award-winning chef featured in various food magazines and a native of Honduras. She generously offered her time to speak to me about her restaurant. At first, I thought Alma Cafe was a fusion of Honduran and New Orleans cuisine, but I was wrong. Melissa was quick to correct me. It's modern Honduran, not a fusion, as explained by Melissa herself.
How do we create modern Hondurans? That's in my head. That was the most important things, but still keeping the traditional flavors of Honduras. So it took me to eat a lot of bad food that I really didn't like. It took me back to the basics of because as a chef, I didn't want to reinvent the wheel. Hondurans wasn't ready to be fine dining until now. This year I went to Honduras to spend a month over there, and there's a group of Honduran chefs. They're pushing Honduran cuisine to be fine dining. And don't get me wrong, I'm in that wagon now, but Alma is not that. Alma is not gourmet or fine dining. Alma is casual, relaxed. We started because of the pandemic. We opened in October 20 of 2020, in the middle of the pandemic, with 50% capacity inside and full capacity outside. And we haven't stopped growing since we opened.
Amazing.
But how do we make modern Hondurans? So eating, taking notes, doing my research, talking to my sister Anna, talking to my sister Salma, So my sister Anna moved from Honduras to here. She's the traditional part, and I am the modern part. So she cooks something like, let's put an example, the pollo chuco. So traditionally, pollo chuco has a bone. It's the whole leg. It's the whole quarter. Mm-hmm. You know, they marinate it. They poke holes into them. They bread it, and then they deep fry it. And you eat it with the whole bone because you eat with your hands most of it. So she cooked it like 2 or 3 times for me like that. I couldn't eat it with a fork. I hate eating with my hands.
Here's where we diverge. I love eating with my hands.
Yeah, I hate eating with my hands. But that is because of my mother, you know. We knew how to use instead of forks and knives, European styles since we were little because of my mother to it. So I was like, okay. So I was like, let's take the thigh out, but let's take the bone out of the thigh. So I talked to one of my local vendors because almost 90% farm to table. So I talked to one of my my local vendor that is the one who gets me all the farmers, and I'm like, can you look for one of the poultry farmer that if you can take the thigh out, the bone of the thigh, and just leave it boneless? And they're like, yeah, we can do that. So we marinate it the way they do and everything, and then we bread it and we deep fry it. The profile with that, the flavor was too strong. We had to adapt the spices, and then that's when we introduced the, I did more in the southern brine, which was buttermilk and hot sauce, and then we put some of the traditional Honduran spices into it. So once we did that, we did it about 2 or 3 times until we got it right, and once we got it right, you have an amazing pollo chuco with the flavors of Honduras.
So a trial and error to balance it out.
Balance it out.
Yeah.
Exactly. So the idea is you still have the nail, crispy, salty. You know, you have the pure cabbage and the top of it. You have the salsa roja. You have the pollo on top of it, and then you have the crack sauce, which is el aderezo. And I named it Honduras crack sauce because this has to be something personal. I name my food in my personal life. My ex-wife is American, actually. She's Irish and Scottish. Yeah, she's a New England girl. And she used to go to the restaurants with me to eat the food. You know, white girl wanted to impress. She was like, I know what baleadas are. I was like, okay, cool. She dated another Honduras girls. I was like, okay, awesome. I'll take you eat baleadas. And she's like, that crack sauce, that sauce y'all use, it's like crack. Oh my God, it's so good. Crack sauce. You know, when I opened Alma, we were in the middle of the nasty divorce. So I was like, fuck you, I'll name me crack sauce. Honduran crack sauce.
That's amazing.
So it's stuck in the menu now, everybody. Everybody that comes here. Oh my God, the Honduran crack sauce.
Well, in addition to Honduran crack sauce, much of the food at Alma Cafe reflects parts of Melissa's life as well. Of course, making sure that she nails the modern Honduran aspect without losing what gives Honduran food its identity is essential. But sometimes all you need to do is return to a time when life was simpler to create what I humbly believe are the best pancakes I've ever eaten.
Melissa pancakes. There's 6 little medallion pancakes. Regular pancakes, Honduran pancakes. Honduran pancakes are sweeter. We put honey into them. Or some of them put sugar, you know, depending of your economics. So they're a little bit sweeter. La crema. There we do the sour cream. We do it here. I show my sister how to do crema. So we have the 6 pancakes. We put the crema on top of it, and then we put our strawberry jam on top of it. And then what we do with another thing, we do get a little crema, and then we put honey into it. So that's your syrup. It sounds like I don't know if I want to eat sour cream with that. It sounds a little bit disgusting, but it's the most delicious thing that you will ever eat.
I'm gonna get my list of pancakes once we're done from here. Hey, I'm not leaving without eating something.
So that's that.
I don't know who would think that sounds. That sounds pretty good, actually. Like I wanna.
But that's my childhood. You know, that's my childhood. My mother made that for me. My sisters made that for me because, you know, they're like, oh, okay, you want pancakes? Sure, here are pancakes. And I have pictures of me and my sister memories that I love so much crema that when I was a child, like every child in Central America or Spanish family, you know, you're a kid and you're in your underwear running naked all over the house screaming and everything when you're 2 or 3 or 4 years old. And I have myself sitting in the bottom eating crema with my hands all over, and then it's in my hair, you know, and then my sisters are screaming because they have to give me a shower and all that stuff. So to calm me down, they used to do that. My mother used to make everything from scratch, so she would have strawberry jam because it was my favorite, and then she put the crema on top of it and the bottom, and then the strawberry jam, and I would eat the pancakes like that.
Melissa is not overselling her pancakes. They are indeed the best pancakes I ever ate. And if you ever come to Alma Cafe, you cannot leave until you had the Melissa pancakes. They are that good, and the story behind them makes them taste even better. My lunch destination was Tia Maria's Kitchen, a fairly new restaurant that opened in 2021 and is quickly becoming a local favorite. I was gracefully given an inside look into the kitchen area of the restaurant, where I saw the hard work it takes to prepare delicious Honduran and other Central American meals. The ladies working in the kitchen were Yesenia and Karen from Honduras and Yulma from Guatemala. They were hard at work preparing taquitos and pupusas, which are some of their most popular dishes. These hard-working ladies don't require measuring tools to prepare their food. Their years of experience and recipes passed on from generation to generation have given them all the knowledge they need to make sure everything they prepare is perfect. Funny enough, my fellow Central Americans will be quick to point out that pupusas are Salvadoran, but one of the former cooks in Tia Maria's kitchen was from El Salvador, and she taught this Honduran establishment very well because these pupusas were delicious. It shows the camaraderie Central American countries have with each other. These pupusas were not just delicious, but also felt like a celebration of a Honduran restaurant honoring Salvadorian cuisine. But what goes beyond the food is also the stories that inspired the food and restaurant itself. Marcos Almendares, another native Honduran from La Ceiba, is one of the owners of the restaurant and was gracious enough to give me the backstory of the restaurant.
So my name is Marcos. This restaurant was opened by my brother Saul Almendares, November 2021. And this was always his dream. You know, Tia Maria is my mom. Tia Maria is his mom. You know, So, you know, this is a family restaurant. My mom was always like a great cook, you know, always. Selling plates at church, selling plates at construction sites after Katrina. My mom just always had...
After Katrina?
Yeah. You know, always had a talent for cooking. You know,
Did she just have like little footer
right.
stands? Las loncheras?
No, not even. Just cooking plates, bringing them in the cooler, standing outside, people buying them, you know. It's always been, we just always loved my mom's food, you know. She's always established herself. But, you know, my brother was more of the business-minded person. He was a businessman, you know. He ran an insurance agency. You know, our whole family's insurance agents, really. But, you know, he wanted to expand. He wanted to do the restaurant thing. So he opened this restaurant November of 2021. You know, my mom was skeptical. You know, she's not a businesswoman. She just cooks, you know. But he's got that conglomerate mindset.
Like con Latina mom.
Yeah, you know.
Como todas las madres latinas.
Right.
Solo cocina. You just cook, you know.
That's it, you know. And then my brother, he opened a restaurant November 2021. Unfortunately, a month later, he passed away in a car accident. Yeah, appreciate that. A month after we opened, literally, you know. And
so literally the one who came up with the idea.
This whole establishment, this whole existence is because of my brother Saul. everything here.
So now it's his legacy.
This is my brother's legacy now. You know, luckily my other brother Jose, he used to manage El Gato Negro, which is a very premier Mexican restaurant.
Oh.
He had 5 years of management. So luckily, you know, he took over, you know, he invented a lot of signature plates like San Pedro Maduro, pupusa sandwich, costillas de elote, combo lempira, combo miramar, you know, fritanga, you know, a lot of plates that he invented. You know, my brother's a very creative chef, you know.
Yes.
That's the word. And, you know, we're just keeping my brother's legacy going. Basically, you know, we've been running it longer than he did.
Yeah.
And, you know, it hurts every day, but, you know, we got to keep it going for the brother, you know. And
Absolutely.
for my mom, we got to stay strong. And this is his legacy, you know, so we take it very seriously. And, you know, we want to do right for the community like he intended, you know. And that's the real story, you know. We've been on blogs before, but, you know, my sister-in-law, his widow, you know, I guess she has a hard time talking about it, and I understand that, you know. So, but I always really wanted to get the real story out there. Like, not even the blogs, not even Ola.com, not even Ian McNulty really covered the real story, you know. But I kind of want to change that, you know. I kind of want the real story to be out there, and, you know, that's why I'm talking to you today. Really.
Well, I appreciate that. This is what I want. You know, the camera's on you guys. The camera's on the places. The camera's not on me. It's on you guys.
Right.
The stories, the real human stories.
You know, and, so this is a real legacy that's going on here. We plan on keeping it going. You know, for the brother, for my brother Saul. God bless his soul. And, you know, we do right for the community in his name.
Right. Yeah. When I returned from New Orleans for this video, I told friends, family, and co-workers that it was a very humbling experience, in large part due to the personal stories people were willing to share with me. It's often forgotten that how a dish came about or how a restaurant was established can have its origins in a story of loss, but ultimately also of triumph. If Tia Maria's Kitchen has taught me anything, besides how delicious their food is that while the loss of a loved one is painful, that makes the triumph of keeping a restaurant going in their memory that much more meaningful. Finally, for dinner, I went to the very appropriately named Los Catrachos, which is the nickname given to fellow Hondurans by other Latinos for those not in the know. While the waitstaff here was a bit more camera shy, they were still nice enough to let me record. It was here where I was able to try the famous Honduran baleadas for the first time. The best way I can describe a baleada is to think of a big taco, but even then the description doesn't do it justice. Baleadas are their own thing. Served with traditional fillings of beans, cheese, and sour cream over a huge tortilla, baleadas exemplify the notion of simple, yet delicious. While you can get baleadas at any Honduran restaurant in the city, especially the ones in Alma Cafe, I wanted to save the most recognizable Honduran food for my last restaurant in this video. It's no wonder why it's such an iconic Honduran food. All the flavors mesh together in perfect harmony that can only be created in a Honduran restaurant. For my main meal, I had pollo con tajada, which is Honduran fried chicken served over a bed of fried plantains, cabbage, red onion, and el aderezo, or this restaurant's version of the Honduran crack sauce. It was absolutely glorious, and while the waiting staff was a bit camera shy here, I do want to give a special thanks to my waitress, Fabiola, for her kindness and the delicious recommendation on a fantastic Honduran dinner. Now, while restaurants are a good way to get to know people and cultures, local grocery stores offer another perspective into the lives of normal everyday people. Close to downtown New Orleans, Norma's Sweets Bakery offers local Hondurans and other fellow Central Americans the opportunity to shop and buy their local produce while feeling like they're back at home. Norma's also offers baked goods and homemade food made by the madres and abuelitas of the motherland. They even have a Western Union so that people can send money to their families. It's a one-stop shop for all your basic needs. The owner, Jose, who is Honduran himself, was nice enough to talk to me during my visit, and he explained that even though the Honduran population dominates in New Orleans in numbers, the number of other Central American countries is growing, especially migrants from Nicaragua. In fact, much like Tia Maria's Kitchen's most popular dish was pupusas, people love the Cuban sandwich in Norma's, following in the Honduran celebration and respect of other Latino cultures and sharing in the sense of camaraderie, which is most exemplified by the number of people who come to Norma's to get themselves a simple plate of food that reminds them of home. At first, I thought all this food was cooked by the same ladies who were serving it during my visit. But then the servers told me it was actually cooked by one or two madres or abuelitas most Latinos like myself grew up with. How is that possible? I asked them. Experience, they answered. Which does make sense. This isn't a place where you look for Michelin stars. This is a place where you look for home, and home is what you get. What better way to feel like home than a Latina mom or abuelita cooking large quantities of food for those in need of a homemade meal? In fact, just eating a simple Honduran pastry of bread, cheese, and glazed sugar with a café con leche brought back my own memories of similar foods I've had in El Salvador and Guatemala. I'm not Honduran, but I can feel the Central American connection all the same. During my random walkthroughs in the streets of New Orleans, I had various opportunities to talk with Honduran and other Central American workers who do the invisible jobs that keep a city clean and running. Street cleaners, landscapers, demolition workers, and construction workers all working hard to have a roof over their head, feed their families, and just make an honest living. This gave me an opportunity to talk to Hondurans themselves at a more casual level. Why they came to the US, how they came to the US, and how their life is going in the US. Many of the conversations I had with Hondurans as they went about their jobs were spontaneous, and it wouldn't flow naturally if I just popped up the GoPro all of a sudden. But what amazed me in these conversations is that even after all the decades of history that Honduras and New Orleans have, their reasons for coming haven't changed. Family, work, and better opportunities they can't get back home. It's tragic then that many of these workers are regularly being taken advantage of. Whether it's through wage theft or the threat of deportation for undocumented workers, many live in a state of fear. This is where community leaders like Rocio Aguilar come in. As a worker for the New Orleans Worker Center for Racial Justice, Rocio, who is Honduran herself, plans community events to inform other Hondurans and fellow Central Americans about their rights to combat things such as wage theft and even sexual harassment. It doesn't matter if you're undocumented. You have rights, as explained by Rocio herself.
Nuestra comunidad, especialmente la comunidad indocumentada, experimenta mucho lo que es el robo de salario, el abuso.
Si yo me acuerdo correctamente, esto fue como hace un año. No sé si fue hace un año antes de la pandemia, pero cerca del Bourbon Street estaban construyendo como un teatro o un cine, uno de los dos.
El café.
El café, y se cayó de las prostituciones. Y por lo que yo he escuchado, dos trabajadores que eran hondureños, antes de que eso pasó, le querían decir a los meros, esto no está bien, se va a caer. Los deportaron.
Sí,
a los 2 días se cayó.
Ya. Básicamente el Congreso en ese tiempo, que todavía estaba vigente el proyecto, fue una de las organizaciones que estuvo trabajando muy de cerca sobre esos casos. Esas personas fueron deportadas, lastimosamente, y pues mucho de lo que fue esa investigación, ¿verdad? Sabemos que no hubo una buena respuesta de las autoridades. Creo que todavía el año pasado hubo un juicio sobre ello, ¿verdad? Pero pues lastimosamente ¿cuál sería la palabra? Esos testigos ya no estaban aquí para poder testificar. Y por ello, ¿verdad? También hemos visto la lucha de algunas organizaciones nacionales tratando de conseguir beneficios de protección para los trabajadores que ponen ese tipo de denuncias. Porque no solo pasa con compañías grandes, muchas veces las pequeñas también están involucradas. Entonces es importante que la gente sepa cómo defenderse, que sepa identificar también cuando me están robando el salario. Porque algo que pueden ver y lastimosamente en muchos restaurantes latinos es que también se aprovechan de la comunidad, no pagan horas extras. Y eso es parte de lo que nosotros tratamos de siempre ir enseñando a la gente. Eso es parte del robo de salario. Que le quitan taxes a las personas. No dan respuesta de si esos taxes fueron pagados o no. Es otra forma de robo de salario. Hay muchas cosas de las que pasan y la comunidad indocumentada la vive, lo siente, diario. Puedes ver mujeres que por ser hispanas se les carga más trabajo que a otras, ¿verdad? Entonces todo eso vemos. Y es parte de nuestro trabajo como el centro de trabajadores, tratar de apoyar a esos trabajadores cuando hacen reclamos, cuando quieren poner las quejas ante OSHA, ante el Departamento de Labor, ante el Departamento de Horas y esas cosas de lo que tiene que ver con el Departamento de Trabajo. Es parte de nuestro trabajo. Sí, nos relacionamos con varias organizaciones, tratamos de estar como, nuestras reuniones semanales son una vez al mes, las reuniones comunitarias, y esas reuniones comunitarias tratamos de tener ese tipo de entrenamientos, discriminación en el lugar de trabajo, como el salario, abuso sexual o acoso sexual, todo ese tipo de información.
Es un trabajo muy importante.
Es muy importante y la gente cree que a veces solo el recién llegado. Yo a veces estoy como, usted me está diciendo a mí que trabajó 5 años con esta persona y durante el último año esta persona no le estaba pagando, pero usted seguía ahí con la esperanza de que esto pasara. Pasa. Sí, porque nunca me han quedado mal, pero hay que aprender. Y también he conocido muchas personas hondureñas por las cuales de repente me involucré en el movimiento, se podría decir, que me enseñaron también, ¿verdad? Lo que ellos ya habían aprendido. Básicamente, fueron personas hondureñas con las que me relacioné, que ya estaban involucrados en la organización, que ya conocían bastante sobre sus derechos. Yo me involucré en sí cuando experimenté el robo de salario.
Usted en carne propia.
Yo misma experimenté el robo de salario 2 veces. Yo dije, no puedo quedarme así. Y algunas personas me dijeron, vaya a este lugar, ahí le van a apoyar. Ya llegué, de la primera vez que llegué y me gustó lo que estábamos hablando sobre cómo defender tus derechos contra la policía, sobre el otro, me gustó mucho. Porque me quitaron como una venda de los ojos, me enseñaron que hay derechos para todos. Ahora hay que entenderlos, comprenderlos y defenderlos. Muy, muy importante.
While the topics of how undocumented workers get taken advantage of can be depressing, it also shows why the work that Rocio does is so important. Undocumented immigrants are not helpless, but the powers that be do a good job in making them think they are. So this is where Rocio, the New Orleans Workers Center for Racial Justice, and other similar organizations come in to let migrants of all walks of life know about their rights so they have the tools to defend themselves. And with that, this personal journey to discover the unique and fascinating history and diaspora of Honduras in New Orleans comes to a close. To say this was a humbling and eye-opening experience for me is an understatement. Everyone I interviewed for this video voluntarily took time out of their busy schedules to share their stories about how they see the Honduran community growing in New Orleans. My sincerest gratitude goes out to them, to the various everyday workers I met while walking the streets, and to my friends and family for their support in pursuing this project. I hope you learned something new about New Orleans like I did. The next time the Big Easy is on your list of vacation destinations, stop by a Honduran restaurant. You might just discover a side of New Orleans you never knew existed. Thank you for watching.